Early Muslim expansion explained in 8 hours from Yarmouk to Tours essay conflicts, the Ghassanids and the Lakhmids. These two Arab tribal confederations migrated from modern Yemen and became the vassal states of the Eastern Roman Empire and the Sassanids respectively. They participated in the Roman-Sassanid wars, often as scouts or raiders detached from the armies, or as light cavalry units within the armies, while also defending both empires from the Arab tribal raids from the south. The populations of these kingdoms worshipped traditional Arab paganism and Monophysite Christianity, and the latter created tensions with their suzerains, as the Sassanids were sure that any Christian influence may strengthen their Roman enemies, while the Romans adhered to Miaphysite Orthodox Christianity, which considered Monophysitism to be heretical. The Roman attempts to suppress Monophysitism caused the Ghassanids to rebel against them in the late 6th, early 7th century, and weakened Roman support in the area. On the other hand, religious tensions between the Lakhmids and the Sassanids were compounded by the attempts of Shah Khosrow II to control the region directly. In 602, he captured and executed the Lakhmid king Al-Numan III, turning the kingdom into a province administered by a governor. That forced the Lakhmid tribes to ask their Arab brethren to the south for help. Although the Allied forces managed to defeat the Sassanid army at Daikar in 609, the Sassanids were able to keep the province under their rule. This sequence of events not only created divided loyalties among the Arab tribes in the region, but effectively stripped the Sassanid border of its traditional buffer. Despite that, the Sassanids were still very strong. In 602, they used the internal strife within the Eastern Roman Empire as a pretense to declare war. The Sassanids scored a number of impressive victories in the first years of the war, and although the Roman noble Heraclius took the throne in 611 and started to stabilize the situation, he wasn't able to slow down the enemy completely. By 621, the Sassanids controlled the South Caucasus, the Levant, Egypt, and most of Anatolia, which marked the largest extent of their territory. Even though Emperor Heraclius was forced to fight against the Avars in Europe too, he was able to gain some momentum by winning 2 battles against the Sassanids between 622 and 625. According to some sources, Khosrow enlisted all men capable of fighting and turned the tide again. In 626, the army under Sharbaraz besieged the capital of the empire, Constantinople, supported by the Avars and Sclavini from Europe. The Roman Empire was on the brink of destruction, but the defenders of the capital persevered. This was the turning point in the war, as in 627 Heraclius entered an alliance with the leader of the Western Turkic Khaganate, Tong Yabgu, and together they invaded Iranian heartland. Heraclius defeated the Sassanids at Nineveh in 627, and threatened the capital Ctesiphon in 628, which prompted the nobles to overthrow Khosrow. His son Kavad II became the next Shah, and signed a peace treaty with Heraclius. The Sassanids paid a war indemnity, but otherwise the conflict achieved nothing, and the two exhausted empires returned to the pre-war borders. Meanwhile, to the south, the Arabian Peninsula was going through an upheaval. The population of this peninsula worshipped many religions, from the traditional Arab pagan beliefs to Zoroastrianism, Judaism, and Christianity. The Sassanids controlled the province of Mazin and the eastern portion of Yemen, while the deserts in the central and northern parts of the region were ruled by the nomadic Bedouin Arabs. Their brethren resided in the rich merchant city-states in Hijaz. One of these city-states, called Mecca, was both a religious and economic center governed by the Quraysh tribe, trading mostly spices with Aksum, the Romans, and the Sassanids. In 570, a boy called Muhammad was born in the Quraysh tribe. As a young man, Muhammad spent his time as a merchant, probably participating in and then leading trade caravans all over the region. As is often the case with traders, Muhammad would meet and converse with members of various religions on his travels. According to the later sources, he started receiving divine revelations sometime in 610. Soon this new prophet began spreading the message of a new religion, Islam, in his home city of Mecca. However, the Meccans didn't receive it well, and in 614 they started to persecute adherents of Islam. All this prompted Muhammad and his followers, the Muslims, to emigrate to Medina in 622. This started a war between the Muslims and Mecca, and by 629 the latter lost and was conquered. According to the early Muslim sources, at this point, sometime in 628, Muhammad sent envoys to the neighboring states urging their leaders to join Islam and bow to the one God Allah. The Sassanid Shah Cavid insulted the Muslim envoy, while the one sent to the Romans was killed in Ghassanid territory. This prompted an attack by a small Muslim army, which was defeated by the Ghassanids and Romans in September of 629 at Muta. The same sources claim that Muhammad decided to lead a 30,000-strong army into the Byzantine territory to retaliate and took the city of Tabuk. However, most modern sources do not agree with this account of events. In any case, the conquests of Muhammad in Arabia continued. By 631, most of the Arabian Peninsula was under Muslim control. Muhammad passed away a year later. There are conflicting sources regarding the succession process, but one of the closest allies of Muhammad, Abu Bakr, became his successor with the title of Caliph. He was the first of the Rashidun caliphs. In the meantime, Cavid II, who became the Sassanid Shah in February of 628, immediately started killing his brothers to secure the throne, which resulted in deepening disagreements between the Persian and Parthian nobles. Cavid died of the plague in September, and although his 8-year-old son became the next Shah as Ardashir III, the empire was controlled by a member of the Parthian clique, the Vizier Mahad Harjushnas. This deeply concerned the Persian party, and so it allied with Khosrow's general Sharbaraz. The latter took the capital in April of 630, killing Ardashir and Mahad Harjushnas, and becoming the Shah. The Sassanid realm was now in a state of civil war. Using all that, the governors of Yemen and Mazan declared their independence from Ctesiphon, which made them easy prey for the rising caliphate. Just 40 days after Sharbaraz took the throne, he was killed, and the leader of the Parthian faction, Farrukh Hormizd, raised Khosrow's daughter Baran to the throne. This first queen in Sassanid history was overthrown by the son of Sharbaraz, Shapur, a few months later. To stop the war between the factions, Farrukh offered a marriage between Shapur and another daughter of Khosrow, Azarmadakhsh, but the latter refused, and the noble usurped the throne for himself in the late 630. He would be killed by the supporters of Azarmadakhsh in 631, after which she took the throne for herself. Farrukh's son Rostam marched his troops to Ctesiphon to avenge his father, defeating Azarmadakhsh's armies along the way. After taking the capital, he restored Baran as the queen. The ruling alliance of Baran and Rostam managed to convince the leader of the Persian clique Pyrrhus to stop the hostilities. However, after Rostam left the capital for the frontier, Firuzan killed Baran in June of 632. Rostam then marched for the capital again. According to some sources, the armies of both Firuzan and Rostam were tired of the bloodshed and forced their generals to reach an accord. One of the last members of the House of Sazan, the 8-year-old grandson of Khosrow II, was crowned as Yazdijerd III. Although the civil war was now over, the Sassanid realm was extremely vulnerable, as the Parthian clique basically controlled the northeastern portion of the empire, while Turkic raiders attacked from the Caucasus and Central Asia. At the same time, the first Caliph Abu Bakr sent a portion of his army under Usama ibn Zaid to raid the Ghassanids in June of 632, possibly checking if the Byzantine frontier was well defended. The death of Muhammad and the departure of this army made a big number of newly conquered Arab tribes think that the caliphate was fragile, and in July all of the peninsula save for Hijaz rebelled against Abu Bakr in what was called the Ridda War, or the War of Apostasy, as many rebel groups were led by people who declared themselves prophets. The situation was most dire around Medina, as the rebels threatened the second most important city of the new realm in late July. However, Abu Bakr swiftly marched to the area and defeated the rebels in early August. That gave enough time for the army, which was sent north and defeated a small Ghassanid army around Muta, to return. Abu Bakr proved to be a talented commander. Instead of uniting his armies and marching on each of the rebel groups separately, which would have allowed the rebels to attack his rear with impunity, he divided his army into smaller groups, and these units attacked the enemies around the peninsula. This strategy worked to perfection, and by March of 633, the caliph's rule over the entire region was restored. It is difficult to assess how much the caliphate lost in terms of manpower, but the sources underline that the generals and troops gained invaluable experience in this conflict. While the Ridda Wars were going on, the leader of the Arab Bani Bakr tribe, Mutana bin Haritha, was raiding the Sassanid territories in southern Iraq. The Sassanid civil wars made this frontier subject to attacks, and Mutana, who adopted Islam sometime in the 630s, informed Abu Bakr of this fact in early 633. The Caliph decided that it is a good time to take over Iraq, and one of his main generals during the Ridda Wars, Khalid ibn al-Walid, was ordered to invade the region. Khalid was able to recruit an army of 18,000 at his base at Yamama and left for Iraq in late March 633. A letter was sent to the Sassanid governor of Dastmesen Hormizd, demanding his surrender. Hormizd obviously didn't, but sent a letter to the capital, asking Shah Yazdijerd III for reinforcements. This letter was probably a trick by Khalid, as Hormizd gathered his 20,000 and marched out of the capital of the governorship, Uballa, to defend the crucial road from Yamama near Kazima. Khalid, however, moved his troops through the desert and threatened Hufir. The Sassanid leader was informed of this and had to march towards Hufir via Uballa. According to the Muslim sources, that was exactly what Khalid was hoping would happen. Despite the civil wars, Sassanid armies were still stronger, as their armor and weaponry made them superior, and the only tangible advantage Caliph's forces had was their mobility. Khalid was going to use this mobility to tire the Sassanid army. This would become one of the most important elements of the early Muslim expansion. Their mobility and aggression were forcing their foe to defend multiple cities and fortresses, as it was never clear where the Arabs would strike. By the time Hormizd reached Hufir, Khalid started marching to Kazima. He could have probably taken the city with ease, but didn't want to be besieged by the heavily armored Sassanids, so his troops waited and rested to the south of Kazima, while Hormizd marched towards him. In the first days of April, the tired Sassanid forces approached. The engagement that would occur in the area is traditionally known as the Battle of the Chains, due to the description of the Sassanid forces in the Muslim sources. According to them, the Sassanid infantrymen were chained to each other to create a cohesive line or to prevent any retreat. However, this makes no sense tactically, as that would have made the infantry even less mobile, and each dead warrior would have burdened their companions. We also never see this description in the numerous battles fought between the Romans and the Sassanids. Most probably, this stems from an incorrect reading of the Persian word silsila, which can be translated as a mountain chain or a bounding chain or a single line of soldiers. So the word chain might be a metaphor for the disciplined Sassanid infantry. In any case, Khalid wasn't going to allow Hormiz's troops to rest, and his preparations forced the Sassanids to form up directly to the west of Kazima at the end of the tiring march. Their formation was the traditional infantry center and cavalry wings. Meanwhile, Khalid's army was arranged in a similar manner, but for the time being stayed in the desert behind the hills dividing the two armies. This delay only added to the fatigue among the Sassanids, as they had to stay in formation in their full panoply under the sun. However, this waiting couldn't continue for long, as the Sassanids controlled the springs in the area. So a few hours later Khalid emerged on the hills and his troops stopped some distance away from those of Hormizd. The only surviving primary sources of this engagement belong to the Muslim historians, so we will present their view of this battle. As was customary for the region and traditional for the Roman, Sassanid and Arab battles of the era, the battle started with a duel, as Hormizd moved forward and called Khalid to fight him one-on-one. Apparently, Hormizd then dismounted and Khalid followed suit. As two generals clashed and fought to a standstill, a few Sassanid skilled warriors attacked Khalid. Another Arab general, Kaka bin Amr, who will play a larger role in the future, saw this and also decided to join the fray, attacking Khalid's assailants. Kaka and Khalid were able to overcome the Sassanid fighters and killed Hormizd. The Arab generals returned to their lines and Khalid ordered his troops forward. The armies engaged each other. On the wings, the balance of forces didn't allow either side to gain the upper hand, while in the center the Muslim infantry charged their counterparts a few times, clashing and falling back without dealing much damage. However, the Muslim troops were much more rested, as even the infantrymen had traveled to the battle mounted. The Sassanid footmen weren't able to rest after their march, and each charge tired them even more. During one of the charges, Khalid's center managed to crack the disciplined Sassanid line in a few places. The Sassanid army, which was left leaderless in the wake of the duel, panicked, and the commanders leading the wings, Qubaz and Anushjan, started retreating with their horsemen. Their Muslim cavalry counterparts didn't chase the enemy horsemen and instead enveloped the Sassanid center. Soon the battle was over. We don't have a clear source on the number of casualties, but it is probably fair to assume that half of the Sassanid army was lost, while Khalid's casualties were less than a few thousand. Meanwhile, Shah Yazdijerd, who received Hormuz's letter in late March, decided to send an army under Karinz to reinforce his governor. The speed at which it happened suggests that only the forces around the capital were gathered. According to the sources, Karinz had somewhere between 15 and 25,000 men when he moved south and crossed the Tigris. He was apparently moving towards Uballa to help the governor, but after he crossed the small river called Makil, he encountered the rest of the Hormuz army led by Qubaz and Anushjan, some 10,000 troops. Karinz was told about the events of the Battle of the Chains. Simultaneously, a mobile force commanded by Mutana appeared nearby, probably sent by Khalid to chase the remainder of the Sassanid force and scout ahead, while he was recruiting from the ranks of Arab tribes in the area of Kazima and Hufir. We don't know what Karinz was thinking at this point, but it is clear that the Sassanids understood that they were not dealing with a minor raid, and they faced a traditional Bedouin Arab army made up of light cavalry. Catching Mutana's mobile force in the open field would be impossible, since the Shah's army was considerably slower, so Karinz didn't move to the strategically crucial Uballa to protect it, likely worried that Mutana would be able to attack his flank and rear. The Sassanid general decided to sacrifice Uballa and keep his position along the river in order to prevent Khalid from crossing the Tigris, and also from marching westwards to the most important city of the region, Al-Hira. In the meantime, Khalid was informed by Mutana that a new army was moving to the south. The Sassanid position left him no other way to advance. Using the whole army to take Uballa might have entrapped him, so only a small group was sent to take it, while Khalid went on and united with Mutana. The battle that is now known as the Battle of the River took place in the third week of April. The Sassanids had anywhere from 25 to 50,000 troops, depending on the sources, while Khalid commanded around 18,000, as he was able to reinforce his army by recruiting from the local Arab tribes. The sources for this battle are conflicted, so we will try to do our best to form a coherent narrative. Before the armies formed up in the morning, Khalid personally scouted the positions of Karinz's forces, and was now sure that winning a set-piece battle was his only option to continue the campaign. He returned and the armies started to get into formation, both having a similar structure with infantry in the center and cavalry on the wings. The Sassanid army was deeper, as its commander made no attempts to widen his front and outflank the enemy, probably relying on the superiority of his troops and the fact that his second rank would be fresh when the time came. The battle started with Karinz calling for a duel. According to the Sassanid sources, the duels were a way for the commanders to prove to the troops that they are ready to fall for them, so a personal combat between champions was a usual sight. Khalid wanted to answer the call, but one of the duelists who was near him galloped towards the Sassanid commander and Khalid stayed back. In the ensuing duel, the Arab fighter was able to defeat his opponent. That demoralized the Sassanids, so Qubaz and Anushjan were probably forced to march forward and demand another duel, to restore their morale. The Muslim wing commanders Asim and Adi galloped to them. Soon, the Sassanid commanders were dead and Khalid ordered his entire army forward. Despite the fact that the Sassanids lost all of their top commanders, initially this charge was fruitless, as the forces of the Caliphate failed to make any headway and were even pushed back. But this pushback made the Sassanid lines disorganized, as the units lost cohesion due to the lack of command. Khalid was able to exploit